Also, we should think about science and technology in terms of the ultimate promise that it brings in bringing broader social and economic transformation, mainly through the democratization of science and technology, enabling women and all individuals to have agency over their physical, health, reproductive, economic, education, political, and social choices. This is how we're going to move toward empowerment through equality and eliminate structural causes of gender-based violence. Both are essential. Both are necessary. Gender-based violence is a pervasive global challenge that serves as a barrier to national economic and social advancement across the world. So how has AID been thinking about some of this? We've been really trying to harness this incredible democratization of science and technology that has exponentially increased the power of the tools that we have and the connectivity that we have to each other. But secondly, we've been also trying to crowdsource the world. Using sort of an approach that we call open source development. How do we harness the power of universities? How do we harness the power of individuals, no matter where they may be found, to help us solve some of the world's most intractable problems, and this is one of them. So using things like the grand challenges and prizes, we've tried to take on elements and parts of this subject. The Tech Challenge for Atrocity Prevention was a prize competition that Don Steinberg, our former deputy administrator, asked us to take on. During the Clinton administration, he was in the White House when the Rwanda atrocities were breaking out. And when the atrocities were potentially giving rise again under this administration, he turned and he said, why is it that we have no better information? We have no better insights, no better tools, despite these great advances in science and technology. How can we use those to try to see what is possible? How do we actually change the landscape that's out there? And so we decided to start experimentation using sort of our newfound ability with prizes. We hosted a prize that was called the Tech Challenge for Atrocity Prevention, a prize competition that brought together technologists and the human rights community together to facilitate the development of new tools and technologies to address things like atrocities, like gender-based violence. And it did so in 5 ways. It actually had a model component. How do we actually predict when an atrocity would be able to break out? It had a component focused on enablers. It focused on the capture of criminals who perpetuated atrocities, and it focused on communications as well as alert. How do we actually give warning to individuals about what is happening? One of the prizes was something called Medicap, also now known as KivuLink, that equipped doctors and nurses with critical tools in collecting, documenting, preserving chain of evidence and court admissible forensic evidence of mass atrocities, including sexual violence and torture. This is important because the International Court of Justice in 10 years has really only convicted 1 individual. So how do we actually improve the efficacy of those bodies to be able to do it? Another tool called Serval was actually used to allow people where there is no cell phone signal or the signals have been turned off to actually allow mobile phones to link to each other and to operate as communication devices to send out warnings. Another challenge that we had is making all voices count, which was a grand challenge for development. $55 million that we'll invest with some of our partners between 2013 and 2017 to try to improve, on one hand, the relationship between governments and their people, but also to improve transparency, accountability, and open governments up. And these are important ways for us to be able to address some of the challenges that we see. We have recently, the agency has recently launched an $8 million incentive fund that was based on the gender-based violence in the USAID Action Plan on Ending Child Marriage. One of the winners of that fund is with us today. And let's give them just a little round of applause for that. But it was Damagi and its partners, RTI and St. John's Research Institute, and I think they'll have a chance to talk about it, to address intimate partner violence in India. An important consideration, using the ComCare mobile health tech, which uses tested methods of being able to identify clinical signs of violence when women go into health clinics for other reasons. It was a way to actually identify who they are and get them access to counseling and attention. USAID is trying to use social media, and through our partnerships with MTV Exit, addressing counter-trafficking in persons, we hope to reach up to 500 million households in Asia. They've recently sponsored a hackathon in Ukraine that actually developed something called SMS Heartbeat, which was a way of tracking those individuals who are working abroad, because people disappear out of the systems and they are lost. And so how it works is it's not unlike sort of a Foursquare type tracking procedure, but that actually sort of mandates people as they're traveling along their trips to be locked in. And if they're not, and a warning or a notice goes out to notify those that we haven't heard from them, that they haven't reached the destinations that they're supposed to get in. We also sponsored a CTIP trafficking campus challenge along this lines that resulted in new tools to help people using Amazon.com to develop something called Abolishop, which uses tools that were developed by the Not-for-Sale database to actually assign a letter grade to items in individuals' shopping cart based on whether or not those items was used in a production system that contributed to or otherwise used as slave labor. And also with the Mix It Freedom Line, which was using an instant messaging platform in the largest of the African social networks to have an anonymized trafficking hotline. These are important tools, but there are other ways that we've been able to use science and technology within what we're trying to do. Some of them perhaps less obvious, but the development of a microbicide by our Global Health Bureau has been incredibly important, because in Africa there is a power asymmetry between older women and younger women, older men and younger women having sex. And in those cases, the men are very unlikely to use condoms because of that power asymmetry. The microbicide actually puts the power of preventing the transmission of HIV into the hands of the women and protects their own livelihoods. But I think ultimately it is not going to be the tools, but I think the broader empowerment that we can bring through the use of science and technology. And some of these things are just starting, but we're seeing the changes starting to happen. We've got some great programs like the Cisco Network Academies that are building opportunities for women that can reduce gender violence by empowering women socially and economically. But also the tools like MOOCs, these massive open online courses, the Code Academy and other tools that are out there to actually teach skills that allow women to participate within a global marketplace for goods. And in fact, we're seeing shifts in how people participate in work that separate work from the limitations of geography. There are places and organizations like Samasource, like Innocentive and Fiverr that allow people to do gig-based work that no matter where they are in the world, it is ultimately these types of tools, these types of approaches that are empowering individuals within the broader setting that will give us the greatest ability to change the landscape and to change the asymmetries that are out there. Technology is not the sole solution that we have, but it has the power to change the reality of what is possible. We'll hear about some of that today, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much. Welcome. I'm Doris Bartel. I'm the head of the Gender and Empowerment team at CARE. And I wanted to give again a warm welcome to all of you for coming out today, and thanks for braving the weather. We're really grateful to everybody who's come out today. Today's panel is a very exciting one we've been planning for a long time. It's part of our 16 Days of Activism, sponsored by the Interagency Gender Working Group, the Gender-Based Violence Working Group of the IGWG, co-hosted by USAID's Office of Population and Reproductive Health and the Population Reference Bureau and CARE. And we're really grateful to the Woodrow Wilson Center also for hosting today. And also particularly grateful for the support of USAID's Office for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment and the Office of Science and Technology for making this event possible. We have an amazing lineup for you today. This is really, is going to be a good afternoon. We have 5 speakers, and we're going to just move right through in this direction. Chris Burns is going to be co-moderating with me. I'll introduce him in a second. And we'll probably try to take about 15 minutes for each speaker, and then we'll pause for questions and answers and a discussion at the end. So I'm going to just move right into our first speaker. Chris Burns is the Senior Advisor and Team Leader for the Mobile Access with Mobile Solutions team at the U.S. Agency for International Development. He's focusing on issues of awareness, affordability, and acceptability that underpin wider mobile adoption across the developing world. He has spent 10 years in the Peace Corps and has a Master's of Science and Development Management from the American University. Welcome, Chris.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be with you all today. I appreciate you coming out this afternoon. The past 3 years, and more poignantly, the past 12 months, have laid witness to monumental, if not heartbreaking, incidents of gender-based violence. Most of you are intimately familiar with them. Events like the gang rape of a 23-year-old woman in New Delhi last December, or the gang rape of a 16-year-old girl left almost for dead in a pit latrine in western Kenya in June, or the stoning of a young mother of 2 by her relatives in Pakistan in July simply for possessing a mobile phone, or finally the mass sexual assault of women in Tahrir Square during the 2011 revolution in Egypt. What you may be less familiar with is an interesting trend taking shape of late. In the direct aftermath of these global, high-profile atrocities, information and communication technology solutions and internet-based advocacy campaigns are surging. It's almost like clockwork. Crime happens, technology response follows. And 2013 has seen an explosion of new efforts. That isn't by coincidence. This technology responds to our visceral need to react, to do something, to drive change by giving voice to victims, survivors, and bystanders, and by permitting healthy dialogue. The best global estimates suggest that over 1 billion women worldwide have experienced some form of physical or sexual violence. An undocumented number of men and boys have experienced similar violence, including, for example, 24% of men in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Add to this child marriage, honor crimes, forced sterilization, to name but a few, and the numbers balloon even more. Again, these elements are nothing new to many here today, and my remarks will not focus on the magnitude of the issue, except to say this. This unbelievable figure, over 1 billion and counting, all told, underscores the importance of driving solutions at scale. At any moment now, the total number of mobile handsets is set to match and surpass the global population, a tripling of mobile adoption in just 10 years. This represents incredible growth in a relatively short period of time, faster than any other form of information and communication technology ever. It also illustrates the power of mobile phones wield for interacting with people at every corner of the world, at a magnitude never before experienced or perhaps even imagined. It's no wonder that the organizations around are clamoring for more mobile technologies to help convey their messages, reach a wider audience, and drive development priorities in countries where there are few communication options. Quite simply, the mobile phone is the single most common denominator for sharing information at scale. It is in this context I've been asked to provide a few comments on the current state of play using technology to prevent gender-based violence. Because of their scale, I'm going to concentrate largely on mobile and internet-based solutions, as will most of the presenters here today. But it is worth noting that other technologies are emerging, such as the establishment of a DNA lab in Kenya last month that will use forensic technologies to address sexual violence against women. And as Alex pointed out in his remarks a few moments ago, additional technology applications are emerging and playing a significant role. I know it's ambitious, but I would posit that we're in a moment in time where we finally have a set of tools that we can apply to eliminate GBV. But doing so requires new models of engagement, ones that benefit from a technology focus, as you will see here today. To be sure, what I will offer you is merely an illustrative list, but they do reign among the cream of the crop. Technology-based efforts fall broadly into or across 4 categories: tools for victims and survivors, tools for advocates, tools to provide voice and empowerment, and tools to crowdsource, map, and share information. In general, most of the applications take a similar format. They offer users redundant options for alerting family and friends in times of danger via SMS, automatic phone calls, email, and Facebook. They use online forums for submitting reports, pinpointing locations of attacks, and uploading photographic evidence where feasible and appropriate. And they enable GPS functionality to aggregate and map real-time locations of violence. Predominantly, though not exclusively, the mobile-based apps require the use of a smartphone, particularly when there is a panic button that triggers SOS alerts on command or when GPS tagging is enabled. The bulk of these tools offer anonymous reporting, a critical component to making people safe and making these technologies successful. Without anonymity, the tools would not function properly. And perhaps above all, what allows for similar functionality across many of these apps is the Ushahidi platform, born out of the 2008 post-Kenyan election violence and designed for information collection, visualization, and interactive mapping in over 50 languages. An open source and free tool, it is the gold standard, already used 25,000 times for crisis mapping. So, I'm going to offer you about 11 examples to illustrate the state of play. Much like many of the others, Safe City India was launched after the New Delhi gang rape and subsequent public outcry a year ago. It's a web-based service for submitting and aggregating reports to help identify hotspots and no-go zones. The site also provides contact information for hospitals, clinics, and police stations in Mumbai and Delhi, and houses a series of blogs that showcase add-on efforts to reduce GBV. Already, it has over 1,600 reports that have been used to craft campaigns, including publicizing the top 100 unsafest places in New Delhi. Women Under Siege documents sexual violence in Syria online. It has an impressive storytelling component, too, based in part on the data that has been submitted. The conclusion after 1 year of this data, out of a total of 162 reports, at a reporting ratio of 4-to-1 women to men, Syria has a massive rape crisis, with 85% of women and 50% of men submitting reports reporting rape. Certainly such evidence will help them of making their goal of making atrocities visible so that one day justice may be served. Perhaps the most well-known app is HarassMap. 83% of Egyptian women have been exposed to some form of harassment. The founders of it, tired of feeling helpless against such unfavorable odds, kicked into high gear following the mob assaults during the 2011 revolution. Their version of the Ushahidi-based tool is decidedly low-tech and receives anonymous reports of sexual harassment through SMS, a feature available on any mobile phone. The website, where incidents can also be reported, visualized, and categorized via crowd maps, not only offers the women the knowledge of areas to avoid, but in theory also provides authorities important data on places to concentrate and increase security measures. Rebecca Chow, the founder of HarassMap, explained to us recently that the trick to getting people to understand this tool and feel comfortable with it and accept the fact that GBV is indeed a serious concern in the country is to send volunteers out onto the streets armed with these maps in hand. By showing them to bystanders, bystanders have become convinced that it is indeed an issue worth addressing. HarassMap now has equivalent initiatives through separate organizations in India, South Sudan, Palestine, Lebanon, Yemen, Bangladesh, Syria, Pakistan, and another 11 countries in the works. I'm actually starting to wonder if we're in the midst of a HarassMap revolution itself. In a unique twist that I kind of like, the Open Institute launched their Crowd Mapping for Cambodia initiative in July, with an explicit focus on offering government officials and key stakeholders the opportunity to track incidences publicly and transparently so that ignorance and inaction would appear unacceptable. I'm not going to highlight Circle of Six because we'll hear from Nancy in a few, but it's a smartphone app that saw a huge spike in increase in downloads after the New Delhi incident a year ago as well. Fight Back is another smartphone-based reporting tool centered around the panic button. Pitched as India's first mobile application for women's safety, 35,000 women had downloaded the free app as of last February. Clearly, India is far out ahead of other countries. Pivoting slightly, the Vodafone Fiji Foundation launched the Women Fiji initiative earlier this year. The free service requires only the basic of mobile handsets and allows survivors and family members, especially those living in remote areas, to interact with professional counselors and lawyers on issues of sexual assault and abuse. Nearly 25,000 Fijians have subscribed to this service, with 2,000 already sending inquiries to these professionals. The magnitude of incidents over the past year has also sparked an uptick in sponsored domestic violence-themed competitions and hackathons in Nepal, Cambodia, Central America, and the US. Alex pointed out a few that USAID is doing, but there are also a few more. Self-help is just one example of one that was born out of the June 2013 hackathon in Nepal, coordinated by the World Bank. In addition to providing the reporting functionality that's normally there, They employed crowdsourcing tactics to discover what ideas were best suited for driving innovation and change. Circle of Six is another winner, born out of the White House's Apps Against Abuse Technology Challenge in 2011. And then there are the online advocacy campaigns that offer a suite of services to generate action. Take Back the Tech is a prime example. 2,000 million more men than women have access to the internet. Being outnumbered by such great lengths, and upon facing greater cyberstalking and digital abuse, women are discouraged by online experiences. Take Back the Tech strives to reverse this trend through online advocacy campaigns with toolkits, blogging functionality, content creation forums, campaign kits, and mapping tools available in English, French, and Spanish. Since its inception in 2006, campaigns have been started in nearly 20 countries. And I love Crowd Voice. It tracks the voices of protest by curating and contextualizing valuable data, such as eyewitness videos, photos, and reports to facilitate awareness about movements worldwide. It also has a rich library of GBV and violence against women incidents and reporting with an excellent search engine. That is but a snapshot, believe it or not, of the trends that have emerged over the past few years. Now, I'd like to go back for a moment to the stoning of that young mother in Pakistan. Her crime, having a phone. We've seen somewhat similar backlash in other countries over the past 4 or 5 years, such as wives being murdered in Uganda and numerous cases of domestic violence in Zimbabwe, simply because of jealous husbands and boyfriends accusing their partners of receiving text messages and calls from men and therefore infidelity. These reactions, unintended consequences to be sure, complicate our understanding of the transformative role that technologies have, because the mobile phone itself has contributed greater incidence of GBV. How then do we balance technology as a life-enhancing and GBV prevention tool against this backdrop of violence against women as a result of their mobile use? These are some weighty internet-connected issues that cannot be ignored. So what's missing? I'll give you 6 points, but there are certainly a few more. First, despite advances made, only 39% of the developing world owns a mobile phone. Also, we know through USAID's investment in the GSMA and Women program, and through other research, there are considerable gender gaps with respect to mobile ownership and internet use. In low and middle income countries, women are 21% less likely than their male counterparts to use a phone. This obviously becomes a significant factor when preventing GBV and violence against women. Second, several of the tools highlighted today are only available in select languages, thereby limiting who can use them. Moving forward, efforts will want to consider incorporating other technologies, such as interactive voice response, those automated voice prompts that we're so used to here in the States, so that more people can access the platform and report incidents in their own language. Third, awareness building is important. It is powerful. It is not enough. Advocacy efforts must be linked with a broader set of support structures and services at the community level that enable survivors to find some semblance of normality and continue to be engaged, productive citizens. Technology tools are just that. They're tools, and they cannot be applied in a vacuum. Fourth, the fact that many apps are designed for smartphones or require internet access limits their availability. Smartphone penetration is still relatively low, at 22% globally, and their costs remain high. In sub-Saharan Africa, smartphone penetration is about 6%. Forecasts expect this to increase to about 20% by 2017, but at that rate, we're still a decade away from full adoption. Fifth, speaking of Africa, it leads globally in rates of violence against women, with about 45% experiencing some form of physical or sexual violence. But apart from South Africa and Egypt, the continent trails other regions in applying technology solutions. This actually surprises me. I doubt it's in direct correlation to the level of mobile adoption, because Africa is growing faster than any other place in the world in this category. So there must be other factors at play. Either the technologies are being designed without fully understanding the wants and needs of the users, or efforts aren't reaching the right audiences. Regardless, more of a push needs to happen in this region. And finally, in many cases, access to a mobile phone or the internet in its most traditional sense is not enough, particularly when these tools are in the hands of other family members or neighbors and cannot be used at a moment's notice or in crucial times of need. A broader understanding application of access is therefore required. Beyond infrastructure and connectivity, this includes people's understanding of what mobiles can do to improve their lives, reducing the costs of handsets, services, and data packages, greater technology and traditional literacy, having content that is localized and relevant to people's lives, and addressing the cultural attitudes around women owning and using these tools. As I bring this to a close, since my time's up, what is so powerful about internet and mobile-enabled solutions is they provide a sense of optimism and hope that we can collectively spark action and turn tides by amplifying the number of voices and advocates. They allow us to see data in a new light and apply it to on-the-ground interventions that wake people up to the severity of GBV and afford us a sense that change is possible. And they allow people to feel safe and secure, which is extremely empowering. I like how the New York Times, in recently writing about trends in Indian society, expressed it. They said, "The cheap mobile phone unsettles long-standing gender relations because it introduces a means of autonomy that was not present before. For women in oppressed classes, this autonomy presents new possibilities for emancipation and change. And because these tools will continue to be wielded by a greater number of people, and since their functionality will continue to evolve, we can expect to see newer applications being designed and driven not just by organizations and governments, but by individuals and communities themselves. And this is truly, truly exciting." So I'm going to leave you with just one final thought. Today, we are looking at the fundamental role new technology plays in combating gender-based violence. But we don't need any more of these tools, at least not for now. We at USAID are pleased to see that organizations such as some of the ones highlighted today are defaulting to existing tools instead of building new ones. It is paramount that organizations continue to take the best of the best, modify them to meet local conditions and needs, and deploy them in a coordinated fashion alongside other prevention and support activities. Doing so will provide an invaluable component to reversing current trends and moving closer towards a world without gender-based violence. Please join me in making this a reality. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So from Chris, you heard a little bit of an overview of the state of play currently with looking at the intersection of information and communications technologies and GBV. So I hope you got a sense of the range and the breadth of opportunities that are out there. We have 4 speakers next who are going to give you more of an in-depth look at particular technologies and how it's being used. And we've asked them to just give a sense of the practicalities of the work and how they accomplished what they did, but also look a little bit at the challenges and some of the ethical considerations, including how you ensure confidentiality and privacy for the kinds of people that are using or using that technology. First, we have Bukeni Waruzi, who's going to be speaking to you next. He serves as the Senior Program Manager for Africa and the Middle East, supporting and inspiring local grassroots activism across Africa and the Middle East to safely and effectively use video as a strategic tool for human rights advocacy campaigns. Bukeni also leads the Witness Global Campaign on Sexual and Gender-Based Violence in Conflict Situations. He founded and served as the Executive Director of the Ajedeka Child Soldiers Project, an organization working to demobilize and reintegrate child soldiers in the DRC. He's also produced several films on child soldiers and the spread of HIV/AIDS in the DRC. He holds a master's degree in human rights and conflict resolution from Share UNESCO in Bujumbura. He will be speaking to us today. The title of his presentation is Using Video to Document Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Against Women and Men, Ethics, Safety, and Security. Really interesting topic, so please welcome Bukeni.
So thank you so very much for saying that.
This one?
Yeah. This one. All right, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here this morning. You know, I took my train from Brooklyn, and last night as I was watching, News 12 Brooklyn, if you're familiar, and I wasn't sure I'm gonna make it this morning here. So you can understand why I'm happy to be here. At Witnesses said I lead our GBV campaign in conflict situations, and part of the missions is to empower local activists to safely and ethically use video as a strategic tool to document and to do advocacy on sexual and gender-based violence. This one, oh, here. Okay, sorry. Why, it is the myth of the chronology? Is this one here? Okay, so as you know, we witness, it's a global organization. We work almost everywhere in the world. I mean, in the 5 continents. Myself, I focus on Africa and the Middle East, in addition to the global campaign on sexual and gender-based violence. We have trained thousands of activists everywhere, both working on gender-based issues and other issues. And we are only based in New York, so you can imagine we run the whole world from Brooklyn. And, today I'm gonna, share some of the experiences that, we have learned from our work on SGBV, on how activists were conducting, were documenting sexual abuses across the world. We have primarily focused our work in countries like Zimbabwe, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Kenya, in Uganda, and also in Sierra Leone, back in times where the conflict was there. So I'm going to talk about, one of the aspects of documenting, which is how you collect the interview, which can be used as an evidence in a court of law, but also as a tool for advocacy. I will also talk a little bit about the volume because, everyone now has a mobile phone, and the assumption is everyone who has a mobile phone can film, which is real. And so then we have this challenge of, having massive volume of videos or footage coming out from everywhere, let alone example of Syria from our work where we have hundreds, thousands of footage coming out almost every year. So we're dealing with that issue of volume, and also, how you safely and ethically, document, and also try to talk about some key considerations. But, when we do interview, we usually, try to make sure before interview, during the interview, and after the interview, activists are trained on how to really professionally do that in a way that, you need to find a credible interviewee to make sure you evaluate safety and security, which is all big issues. I'm going to give you an example later on. And also to secure informed consent. We are not kind of journalists. We are advocates, and we train unprofessional filmmakers. So how we make sure when they collect this, informed consent, they follow a professional process, given the safety and security issues around. And also make sure that, the tools and equipment are well prepared. During the interview, I think one of the challenges that we have noticed, so far, during the years of witnesses working on issue of sexual violence, is sometimes there is a kind of a disconnect about the story that the woman is telling and the person who is interviewing. One is just interested in collecting that story, but doesn't compassionate, and that makes the victim or the survivor feels like she's just alone, and this person is just interested to collect the story and then take it somewhere. So that's one of the key considerations that we have noticed. But, as you will see in my next slide, the issue of re-traumatization. This is one of the videos that our partner in Central African Republic has produced. And in the interview, I just, took that slide. You see, but the girl is saying, but tonight I will have nightmares recalling what happened during my captivity. She was, she was a LRA captive. She spent almost, 3 years with the LRA in Central African Republic. And when she got out, our partner, was the one who was assisting, these types of girls with, with kind of, humanitarian assistance. But then they were trying to collect the stories to, use those stories as a tool for advocacy. And this is one of the issues of re-traumatization that we always try to remind our partners. It is very key. You don't try to train or you train your interviewee into, recalling the whole story can be sometimes re-traumatizing. So when you get after the interview, try to revisit the plan, because you always would do advise to have a safety and security plan, which is very important, and also clarify next steps with the interviewee. It's about how you involve the interviewee in the process, so she feels she's part of the process. She's not someone who's being used for the process, but it's a process that she's involved. She has a say. She has the power to make some decisions as well, and also preserve, which is very key. Very often, what we have noticed is that many people, after they collect this footage, the preservation, the archiving becomes an issue. You don't know where to stock your footage because it's just massive, and also you don't have equipment. Key considerations, as I was saying, re-traumatization, very key, but also the distrust. We have seen, times of time, when you secure an interview and then the next day you get a call from your interviewee, I don't want it anymore. I don't want to be in. Then what do you do? These are challenges that people faces, but also expectations. You are a Muzungu. I faced that same, issue with. Sorry, guys. I'm using Muzungu, which means in Swahili, which is my first language, which means white people. So, I had many examples where, folks were coming down and got to meet, women in the village. She didn't even eat, last night. And then you show up, want to collect an interview. She expects something, which is, that happened. Many people who have made films can say that. So that is something that, people or filmmakers do face, but also safety. It's been all over the place, whatever in conflict or in non-conflict situations. There are so many examples that witness partners have documented, partners or in the interviewee facing safety issues. These safety issues are not linked to the interviewees themselves, but also the filmmakers, those who document. But also the culture and values. Sometimes we don't necessarily share same values with the interviewee, and that is very key. Of course, for the sake of time, I'm not trying to go in, details on that, which we can spend the whole day discussing, but I'm just giving some kind of a bullet point. But also literacy. We have seen many times when even we try to secure the consent, we come with a sheet of paper with a written consent where it is kind of a very legal language that is on the paper, and the interviewee just doesn't understand it. So we do try to make sure they use the language that can be really that can be understood by the interviewee as very important. But also advocacy. Of course, when any activist will approach a survivor, the expectation is that her story will serve as a tool for advocacy, which is fine. But sometimes the advocacy goals are not met, and that become a disappointment both for the activist and the interviewee as well. Here, I want to talk about the tools. I talked previously about the safety issue. We have seen back, let's take an example of, the Iranian elections back in 2008, where you have activists who were, taking the footage and then upload the footage on the YouTube. And at the same time, the intelligence agency of the Iranian government were also going to YouTube to track those people who are talking on YouTube because they were in Iran, and then track them and then, incarcerate them. That was the issue. So we witnessed, and with its partner came up with the idea, how do you make sure you protect the identity of those people who are involved in the video, because it was very important. That's where we came up with the idea of, building what we call Obscure Cam. The Obscure Cam it is an app, very simple. You can set it up on your Android phone, and then you can use it when you take a picture. You can have that possibility of blurring the face, or even when you are filming. That was one way to respond to the issue of safety and security when you use video, because everyone has access. Everyone today can upload the video on YouTube, and everyone can see it. So that was the idea that led up to this. And which ObscureCam is really available. You can, you can download it on your cell phone anytime. And the way you use it, of course, here there's no time to do a kind of a small demo, but you can look at the demo that is on YouTube. You just go and then search for ObscureCam, and then you can see how it works, and you can use it if you want. It works on video and also on photograph as well. So these are kind of some ethical considerations. I keep looking at the timekeeper to make sure I don't go over time, and she hasn't, waved that minute, so that means I still have more time. So as you can see, we try to work our partners and activists through some, ethical and safety considerations, because we believe it's very key, it is very important, as we have seen some consequences. Oh, here you go. As we have seen some consequences when you don't really, take in considerations those, those issues. But as I said before, the challenges that we face include the volume, include the verifiability and the credibility, the probative values of your footage, of your materials, which is very important, and also the authentication. And this has led Witness and its partner, which is a developer, which is called the Guardian Project. They are based in London. We've been working with them to build an app that's called InformaCam, which is an app that can help you verify and use the footage that you have for evidentiary purpose. Because we have seen, in the recent years how courts and tribunals have been using, some of the videos as evidence. Witness has great experience working with courts and tribunal, in Africa especially. We have worked with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in a case that involved the Kenyan state and the partners, that was representing the Ndorowes people. It is an indigenous people in Kenya, as they were evicted since 1972, and the government and these people were fighting that eviction through domestic court, but it didn't work, and they took their case to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. It couldn't work without having a video that was introduced as evidence, and that was the first time the African Commission has to really accept a video submitted as evidence. The Kenyan state also submitted another video as evidence, but the evidence was actually rejected as it didn't meet some kind of standard. So been working to think through some kind of standards that could help the courts and tribunal in terms of advancing the international criminal justice system. And, the ICC, as in the Lubanga case involved, the prosecutor versus Thomas Lubanga deal, most of the 30% of the evidences that were brought by the prosecutor were actually videos. And these were very key to really secure the sentence of Thomas Lubanga. So just a matter of seeing how video and more these materials are being used in advancing, international criminal justice, and we've been thinking how the court can set some standard, because each court has its own rule of evidence, and the submissions rules are also very different. So how this court or this system can set up some standards that can allow these citizen witnesses, wherever they collect this footage, can be accepted and used in a court of law to advance justice for victims. So that's how Witness has been working with the Guardian Project to develop the InformaCam. The issue now is the kind of high end, because the way the InformaCam works is that you can film right now, and then your footage will be restored in a very remote place where this footage will be secure. This will be the metadata that any court or judge can refer to in terms of verifying their location, the time, and the veracity of the event. This can be verifiable through the InformaCam. So been working, and now we're trying to look at the mechanism of the repository where this high end will be helpful to make sure that the footage are safely and securely stored. So that is pretty much, and we believe that, in the next 1 or 2 months or so will be a kind of global launch, that these tools or this app as well can be accessed, but still we're working on trying to make sure the high end is also solved. So, here, as I still have 1 minute, we have some useful materials, and this is, for example, we've been working on to developing some guide on how to interview survival of SGBV, and these materials can be accessed on Witness website, which is witness.org. These are kind of guidelines to how to safely and ethically conduct an interview with a survivor of GBV. We just produced a video of it, a video version of the guide, which can be also accessed through the Witness side. I thought I could show even one clip, but these clips are pretty long, 5-8 minutes, and I had kind of 10-12 minutes to speak, so I couldn't have space for the video. But I hope you can go on the site and you can access those videos, which are very interesting if you need to learn how to safely conduct an interview with an SGBV survivor. I talk about how to preserve. We have an interesting guide on how to preserve or how to archive your footage, as it is an issue that many of the activists that we have worked with are facing. How you store your massive footage in a way that is safe and secure to preserve your footage as you work to document SGBV. So that is for now, and I hope I can clarify more when the Q&A will come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very interesting work. Witness.org, in case you need that website for some of those resources. Our next speaker is Mohini Bhavsar. She's the manager of field operations for Dimagi, India. She supports Dimagi's field team implementing ComCare, which you heard about earlier from Alex Deegan. That program is in India and globally. Since 2011, she has helped many organizations design and deploy mobile projects in India. Prior to Dimagi, Mohini consulted at Tula Salud, an NGO using mobile data technology tools for epidemiologic surveillance in Guatemala. She studied biochemistry and health studies at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. So her presentation is called Design and Implementation of Mobile Apps for GBV and Community Health. Please welcome Mohini.
It's okay. I guess we'll get, sorry, you can just press OK. Good, great. Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be presenting some of the work that we're doing in India with gender-based violence. I'm Mohini Bhavsar, and I represent Dimagi, and the project that I'm about to share with you is a project that we started with St. John's Research Institute, RTI, and the Bangalore Municipal Corporation in Bangalore, India, and they are using the ComCare platform, which is a mobile case management software that runs on Nokia phones, so Java-enabled phones, or Android phones, and this particular program is using Java phones. So I'll just sort of go through the kind of work that we're doing here. But to step back a bit, the gender gap in India is very obvious. India ranks at 105 overall among 135 nations globally on the sort of global gender gap index. And the many forms of gender-based violence that are common in India are listed here. I mean, early childhood marriage, honor killings, human trafficking, and interpartner violence. This particular project focused on interpartner violence. So this year, Dimagi collaborated with organizations in Bangalore to assess, to create a gender-based violence screening tool. The tool is used by auxiliary nurse midwives that work in primary health centers, and they have a screening protocol to assess whether pregnant women or mothers that are coming in through their center are showing signs of warning signs of being victims of gender-based violence. This particular in the city of Bangalore, Bangalore is known as sort of a booming tech city. But amongst the sort of city-based urban slums, health centers there are observing 15 to 20 cases of gender-based issues a day. So that's quite a lot. This year, Sukhaya, which is a project that we worked with RTI and with St. John's Research Institute, was one of 40 proof of concepts that we launched with support of USAID's funding through their Div2 grant. So one of 40 programs. In April 2013, we launched this with 10 auxiliary nurse midwives. So they're using ComCare to screen for gender-based violence in the patients that are coming into their health centers. And then we also received additional funding and support from USAID over the next 3 years to scale this project and also put efforts into innovation, advocacy, and evaluation work. So I wanted to sort of briefly describe the gender-based program and the screening protocol that is used and developed by St. John's Research and RTI. So the Primary Health Center offers a safe and timely entry point for gender-based screening, and that's because women come to health centers to receive antenatal care, postnatal care, and they also come to health centers to make sure their children, receive the appropriate, immunizations that they need. So through the Sukhaya project, St. John's Research Institute and RTI International provide a lot of training and capacity building for the health workers that work at the primary health centers there for gender-based, issues. And so we wanted to sort of work with them to take sort of their tested materials and tested protocols and amplify their efforts using mobile technology. So the Sukhaya mobile component consists of 3 forms that run on a mobile phone. The first form is a registration form. So when pregnant women or when women, even if they're postpartum women or women bringing their children, when they come into the primary health facility, they will register the person in the phone. So the registration form might consist of name, patient ID, age, expected date of delivery, these types of things. So identifying information will be filled out on the registration form. Once the case is registered, they'll appear in a case list. So the A&M will then scroll down in her mobile phone, select the case, and once the case is selected, a bunch of questions for warning signs will start to appear. So one by one, the health worker will assess what kinds of warning signs are being displayed, in the patient that has come to receive care. The unique thing about the screening protocol is that the questions are divided, but in the sense there's indirect questions and direct questions in the assessment tool. So the first few questions in the screening protocol ask indirectly, some of the signs that might be, the patient might be showing. So in this example, the question is, although such problems may be common, is there a problem at home or that you would like to receive help on? So they're not exactly asking directly if there's the patient is a victim of gender-based violence, but they're asking in an indirect way. When these questions are answered yes, so there might be 2 or 3 indirect questions. If they are answered yes, a set of direct questions will be displayed, and then in that case, if interpartner violence is identified within that within that patient, the A&M will then fill out a referral checklist. And so the referral checklist consists of some counseling messages, and it offers different types of prompts for services that the woman might want to avail. So this could be, legal services, or she might want to avail services at a shelter, or even more counseling. So the app will actually help the A&M sort of facilitate the A&M through gender-based violence counseling information. Some of the examples of risks that are assessed by the A&M at different sort of stages of a woman's health life cycle are listed here. So at the in antenatal care, they might ask about spontaneous abortions, why they are happening. At the postnatal care, the health worker might ask about weight loss. So if she's seeing weight loss in a mother, she might ask this is not a symptom that is very common for this particular time of healthcare. So are you facing any problems at home? So these are the types of things that the A&M will be asking through the application. The application is facilitated with media. So there's audio and there's images. And this is really important because a lot of the health workers that we work with in India are low literate health workers. So they're actually able to use the mobile tool, regardless of sort of their level of literacy. The application can be prompted to play these types of the information. Now, of course, there's these ethical considerations that we're thinking of when we're designing mobile tools. This is a new area for us, so a lot of these technical considerations that we've had to sort of bring into the project are things that we're learning as we're going. So one of the foremost and most important issues is ensuring the privacy of domestic violence survivors, and because abuse can escalate if perpetrators of the violence find out that someone has actually reported this. So one of the ways that we deal with this on the technical side is we restrict the use of the phone only at the facility, so health workers aren't actually taking the phone into the communities. And only one health worker will use the phone, so there's no sharing of devices. So really trying to maintain, the privacy, of the information of victims that are sort of registered in the application. The application is also password protected, so that is one of the most important things you could do, the first step. So all the A&Ms have their unique password and unique username, so no one can sort of access each other's data. Ensuring confidentiality is also important, and so this is emphasized during the trainings that we provide to the A&Ms before they deploy and start using the tool. Some programs actually don't even register the names, so they will just stick to patient codes. And so they really try to anonymize the data, and some of the child protection programs that we work in, they are sort of looking at more aggregate level data, so they're not actually doing case management and case tracking. So that's, in those examples, they don't actually register the names. We also want to think about de-identifying the data on the back end. So, some of the examples that I've already shared are ethical considerations on the tech side that you want to do for the user that's using the device, but you also want to think about the web user. So like who's accessing the data on the back end. And so you can build in mechanisms into your program, into the tech side, to encrypt the data or also control the access to who has access to the data and things like that. Protection of safety is important for the health workers using the tool and sort of carrying out this protocol, and also for the women that are reporting these issues. Our sort of focus through the Sukhaya project has been to focus on education and training, and so the application contains a lot of education modules. So there's media facilitated material that A&Ms can review with women during their counseling session, and they can also share that media content and the counseling information with others as well. The community, the sort of notions around gender-based violence and the taboos and sort of the sensitivity around these types of issues in India, what we're trying to address may actually not, the health workers themselves may actually be believing in what we don't really, want them to, what we want to change. And so we can do this through, capacity building. So a lot of the program encourages and builds the capacity of health workers to actually be able to counsel and identify gender-based violence issues better, because they may actually have preconceived notions that may be sort of detrimental to what the program is trying to achieve. And so that's another sort of focus area for us, that we have all this existing gender-based violence content that organizations like St. John's and like RTI have tested for many years. Can we aggregate some of that information together in free flow, training modules on the app? So the health worker, aside from just managing her cases on her phone and sort of showing counseling messages that are targeted for those particular cases, you can actually have free flow content, and so she can also self-learn on her own. So we're thinking about including these types of things. Consent is very important. So in the training before health workers start using the tools, they are asked that they must seek for consent, and if consent isn't provided by the woman, then they don't use the mobile tool, and they can still provide counseling and still go through the protocol on paper. They don't have to use the mobile tool per se. As was mentioned earlier, counseling for gender-based violence is unstructured. So typically, a lot of the programs that use ComCare for counseling and for behavior change counseling, they like to sort of organize their content so it can be targeted for different situations, right? So typically, programs that use ComCare for maternal child health, different types of messaging go to women at different trimesters of their pregnancy. But in this case, you know, the counselors have to be very receptive to the response of the survivor. And so you don't necessarily want to build a system that's very, very automated. So in our experience with this particular project, we've actually made it very flexible as well. So there are some pieces that are automated, but we've also added, you know, flexibility into the mobile application. That's very important in this particular use case. And we also, you know, the dynamics of counseling change when you add a mobile phone, right? So you're like trying to pay attention to the woman. You're trying to be sensitive and compassionate about, you know, while you're listening to the story that she's telling you. And at the same time, you know, how are you going to sort of balance entering the data in the phone? And so we focus a lot on the interpersonal communication piece during training. So like, let's just forget about the mobile phone. Let's talk about what, you know, IPC is all about, and then, you know, enter a mobile phone. How is that going to change? And so we talk about these issues during training as well. Some of the health workers actually enter the data retrospectively. Because the protocol is very simple and straightforward, they might actually enter the data retrospectively and not at the time. And that's okay too, so we're okay with that. You know, you should sort of adapt to the situation. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the innovation piece as part of sort of our 3-year plan. Where we really want to amplify, you know, existing gender-based violence resources using mobile technology, and we're trying to explore like how best to do that. So these are 4 strategies that we're going to be exploring over the next couple years. The first is, as I mentioned before, creating standard gender-based violence training modules. So there is existing content on gender-based violence. How do we get the existing sort of workforce of community health workers, you know, trained on this content and learning this content and using this content? So we can create modules in ComCare that are learning modules. They don't have to be linked to case management. So, you know, health workers can review and look at it on their phone. And the great thing is, you know, media can be added to it. So you can have videos, you can have images and audio and all of that sort of integrated as a full sort of education package. We also want to focus on supervision and performance improvement of health workers in general. And so how can we improve health workers, you know, counseling and following up on gender-based issues within, you know, especially because we do have a large network of health workers that are already using ComCare for other programs. And just building off of, you know, the first idea, we want to sort of broaden the reach of content related to gender-based violence. So we don't only just want to create through this grant. We don't only just want to focus on gender-based violence, but we also want to look more broadly and develop content for women's empowerment in general. So health workers that are using ComCare, you know, what other self-learning modules are they interested in engaging in? So is it, you know, literacy? Is it, you know, phone literacy? Is it agriculture information? What other sort of learning modules might help in general, you know, our cause for improving women's empowerment? Gender-based violence ComCare app library. So I'll sort of tease that out a bit. ComCare, we have a ComCare exchange that we've launched about a year ago, and that allows organizations to share the apps that they've developed with other organizations. So organizations don't have to start from scratch. You know, they can take what's already been done, adopt it, and you know, amplify it and scale it. And so what we want to do with the existing gender-based violence resources that are out there is, you know, can we create components of apps that can be shared on the ComCare exchange, and then other organizations can take bits and pieces of that and sort of put it into, include it as part of their mobile intervention. You know, we do see that community health programs, you know, face a little bit of a challenge in including that gender piece in it. So how can we sort of improve that and strengthen gender-based programming in community health? So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mohini. Very interesting. We've moved from some innovation using video technology to mobilize activism and documentation for promoting criminal justice, to mobile phone apps, to as sort of job aids for healthcare workers. And our next presenter is Nancy Glass. She's going to be giving us a glimpse into the evaluation of some of these technologies for use on with mobile phones. Nancy is a professor at Johns Hopkins University School of Nursing and associate director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Global Health. She conducts ethical, clinical, and community-based interventions with diverse populations across multiple domestic and global settings. She is the principal investigator of 5 federally funded multidisciplinary research studies to test the employment, economic empowerment, and safety interventions using innovative technology to improve the health and well-being of survivors of gender-based violence and their families. She collaborates with investigators across multiple disciplines and institutions and partners with community experts and organizations to improve health, safety, economic stability for women, family, and communities. Her presentation, come on up, Nancy. She's going to talk about internet smartphones for survivor safety and health. Is it effective? You can use this.
Great. Good afternoon. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm going to talk soon about the work I've been doing with my colleagues over the last 10 years looking at safety decision aids with survivors of intimate partner violence. So first, when I'm talking about decisional conflict for survivors of intimate partner violence, as we all know, women are weighing every day around the safety for themselves and their children and other members of their family and their community. And they're making complex decisions. And they're not linear, that they change. Violence increases in severity and frequency, and then sometimes it's better, and sometimes it increases again. And so the decisions that she's making are changing rapidly around her safety. Also want to emphasize this is not about staying or leaving in a relationship, because I trust that women who are in these relationships know best, and safety may be staying in the relationship, because we know from evidence after evidence that leaving can be the trigger for lethal violence. So this is about helping a woman think about her safety and the safety of her family during some really difficult and complex times. So what is a safety decision aid? Well, you may have used this in a clinical visit. I'm a nurse, so we use it to help people make decisions about, do they want to try cesarean delivery after they've had vaginal birth? Do they want to try one medication over another? So I was at a presentation, and I started thinking about how I know from my work with survivors how they're weighing these decisions, the pros and cons. Should I stay with my partner because he's providing the health insurance for me and my children, and my child has a health problem? Should I stay in the relationship because I need safe housing and my job, I don't have transportation? All these decisions are being made. And so this is sort of, it started to sound like what I was hearing survivors say, and when I was talking with about safety planning. Then I went to the literature, as you know, I'm a scientist, and realized that we have never had an evaluation of safety planning. It is the cornerstone of what we all do for survivors, but no one has ever said, has it been effective or not? We've never asked women. So I really wanted to try to take this on. So we decided to look at safety decision aids through the internet. We call it the IRIS Project, and that is being funded by the National Institute of Mental Health. And then we developed a smartphone app in partnership with the One Love Foundation. Initially, One Love is Yardley Love, the young woman who was murdered by her boyfriend at the University of Virginia. Her mother came to Hopkins and said, I want to do something around ending violence against women for college-age women, and I want to do it based on evidence. So we've been working with her. So this is the process we've taken. It's a systematic approach. We started with the evidence. We developed the first tool with a lot of input from advocates and survivors around the country. We then evaluated that tool. We took it to shelters and support groups with survivors to get their input, and we tested it. They gave us really good input, and we saw some impact. So then we wanted to scale it up after the revisions, and now we're in the 4th year of a 5-year trial in 4 states in the U.S. Those states are Oregon, Arizona, Missouri, and Maryland. So we have, if you want to take a look at the safety decision aid on the internet, I'd be glad to send you the link. It is in trials, so it is a demonstration site. It's not out for public use, but it will be. We're finishing the data by April of next year, data collection. So this is one part of our the app. You've heard of the danger assessment. We wanted to give women a tool to help them assess their own risk for severe or lethal violence. So my colleague Jackie Campbell at Johns Hopkins has developed the danger assessment, which we adapted and used here in the in the safety decision aid to help women assess their own risk for violence. We also have a version for women who are in same-sex relationships. We also have a version for women in that are immigrants. So based on the data the women enter, they will get the assessment tool that's been validated. So then we want her to consider her own safety priorities. This is something that I think as advocates we often, when we have a woman in the emergency department in our shelter, we think to ourselves, we may never see her again, so let's give her everything we know about safety. And can you imagine how overwhelming that is? So we want to help women step through what are their priorities. And so the evidence tells us the priorities of women, if we group them, there are really 5 distinct priorities that we see consistently. Her safety, if she's a mother, her children's safety, having resources, her privacy and confidentiality, and feelings for her partner. So we have a priority setting tool where they're weighing their priorities. And they weigh it as they move closer to having more resources, would say 100% I'm moving towards having more resources, I'm 100%, that's my priority. Women get very precise, they'll say 76%, 52%. So they really do work through this. And then we give them immediate feedback on your priority for safety and some language to go with that. The key here is personalizing safety decisions for her, helping her link to her priorities, so and her level of danger. So based on the algorithm, this gives her immediate feedback on if she says there's a gun in the home based on the danger assessment, we're going to give her feedback about safety with guns in the home if she's staying in the relationship and if she's leaving the relationship, if she has children in the home. So there's going to be immediate information about if she's interested in custody issues, about custody visitation programs in her community. So it's going to link to, we also ask her to put her zip code in, and we're going to link her to the local resources. And you know, in some areas in Oregon, the local resource is 200 miles away. So we are trying to link her to the state hotline, or other hotlines that they can help her narrow down to her area a little more specifically. So we also, with the app that the One Love helped us build, we have a component for friends. We know that young women in college campuses seek out their friends for information. And we know that friends want to help, but we also know that they have no idea how to help. And they consistently say, I'm just not sure if I'm doing the right thing. So we have a priority setting tool, danger assessment, for them to go through a danger assessment about their friends. We know this works. We did it in a study in 10 cities in the US around lethality. Proxies have completed this for women. We know that people, they may not know everything about the danger, but they know a lot. And so they can get an idea of how dangerous the situation is, and it can help them think through how they can help their friend. And that might be just saying, I'm concerned about your safety. I know about this resource. The other thing we found out when we did focus groups with college-age women is that they're afraid to go to the health center. I didn't think about this. They're afraid that it'll be billed to their parents, and their parents will find out what's going on, so they're not going. So just thinking through those things with your app, what are the other resources in the community we can link them to? They may be on campus or off campus. So this is sort of the Nancy Glass simple version of technology. So this is our content team and our development team. What's so nice about the architecture of the work, what we've been developing over the few years, is that our content team, so our experts who know DV, can go in and edit, revise, hide information as we develop this. And then our development team is helping us with the user interface, the data collection, the things we need to do to keep this up and processing on a day-to-day basis so people can access it through multiple different, from Firefox, from Chrome, from all those things that I don't want to know about, but my developer does know about it. And then we also have made a commitment through best practices that people have access through this to the web and through mobile platforms that are Android and what we all love, or I do, what do I have, an iPhone? The iPhone. So we're doing a trial, and we have the most amazing team throughout the U.S., but we really want to know, can this reduce decisional conflict around safety? Do women feel more confident in their safety decisions, feel like they have the support and information they need in making decisions about their safety, whether staying or leaving the relationship. Can we increase their use of safety resources? We all know 10%, it's estimated 10% of survivors ever access formal services. So we have all these great services in many places, all over the world. I work all over the world. They're a great thing. We don't get people to them. So this can help, we hope, reducing their exposure to intimate partner violence because they've used strategies that have been more effective for their safety. And then we're also, because we're funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, we want to look at depression and PTSD over time. So we're following women over 12 months. So we are looking for women who are currently in abusive relationships. So they self-define that they are currently in an abusive relationship. They are comfortable using the internet and have a safe email. And I can go through all the protocols. I'm just going to touch on them briefly because they took a lot of work and a lot of piloting to make sure we first do no harm. We really didn't want to put women at risk for engaging in this. And they're either randomized to our safety decision aid or what we call a usual care website that we built that would be what they would see if they went to the Family Violence Prevention Fund, or if they went to, that they wouldn't have tailored safety plans, but they would have safety plans that women would use, and they wouldn't have the danger assessment, for example, or safety priorities, which is our safety decision aid. And then we're measuring women. We're talking to women 3, 6, 12 months. They log on. We only talk to them one time, and then we never have to talk to them again. It's all through the internet. So 77% of our participants found us through Craigslist, the power of Craigslist. That's where we advertised. And that was purposeful. We wanted women who had safe access to email, that were using the internet, that may or may not be using traditional services, may or may not have yet defined themselves as abused women. We don't say, are you an abused woman? We talk about being in an unsafe relationship. 40% of our participants self-identified as racial and ethnic minorities. This is incredibly important because this is one of the critiques. People told us that ethnic and racial minorities would not use this. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. And 11% of our survivors self-identified as sexual minorities, partners of female. There are replica studies. I have colleagues in Canada, Vancouver, that are implementing this in the British Columbia, Ontario, and Halifax. It started in Victoria, Australia. I was just in Australia for 2 weeks as they were starting this up, and also in New Zealand. We're just submitted a grant for Hong Kong, so we're trying to build this out in other countries with colleagues. So where do people go on to find us? Well, a lot of them go on at home, about over 50%. But what's important, they access the website through their workplace, but also through their public library. Almost 13% access through the public library. Other is their community program, their housing program, where they have a caseworker that's helped them get access. So if women feel something is useful, they will go to another place to get it, a safe place. So the challenge is certainly changing technology. We're always trying to keep up with the technology and the new advances. Also, these resource links. Do you know in our country we don't have a single group that has linked or really keeps up to date with all the resources in states and nationally? So my research assistants are constantly randomly checking the sites to make sure they're still active, and that takes a lot of manpower. So we've been talking with the National Domestic Violence Hotline about setting up a way that we could link these resources to have better access to them. And this is in Spanish as well as English, but reaching rural women, I know I say that funny, rural women, and Spanish, monolingual Spanish people has been our most challenging, and so we're doing some more work in that area. We have some additional research. And access to safe computers and smartphones, really in that one conversation we have with women, enrolling them to the study, we really talk to them about safety and access. If they don't have an email that they feel like their partner doesn't have the password to, we help them open up a new account. So we send them information about how to hide their history, everything we can about how to keep this safe. And one of the key issues that came up with us is when we are collecting information about mental health, we started to see suicidality in the data. Women reporting that they felt depressed, they felt like hurting themselves. And these are things that you would expect in domestic violence and intimate partner violence, we do have a pretty high rate of suicide and suicidality. So our protocol, what we used to do at the beginning is when a woman's screened positive on the depression tool around feeling like she would hurt herself, kill herself, our trained RA would directly call her and ask her if she would like to have information about safety, suicide, and this was at the safe number she gave us. Well, that made women crazy. It made sense to me after it did it. But we did that because our institutional review board required us to do it. So what we did was we got women to tell us how they would like it, how they really wanted that done. So the women gave us feedback, said, so we have a pop-up window that comes up now. As soon as they say that, it says, would you like us to call you right now? What is your safe number? And that they put in the number and we can call them. Or they say, I have somebody I'm already talking to, and I feel safe now, but I know how to get in contact you. So we have some options for them to choose from, and then we'll respond how they choose. And the other thing with that is we provide everyone with the National Suicide Hotline, and also there's a chat option for that as well. So the good news is our initial data, when we look at just the pre-post use of the decisional conflict, after one use, which is on average taking about 45 minutes, we can see how long it takes for women to go through the safety decision aid. After one use, survivors report less decisional conflict about their safety. Specifically, they report less uncertainty, more clarity of their values, and more support about safety. The thing we aren't seeing a significant difference between the intervention and control group is more information. They don't feel like they have more information. But that's why we think it's important for them to have ongoing access to this, and that's why we give them access to it over 12 months through the study as they're enrolled. We get unsolicited feedback from our participants, and this is what keeps us going, as you can imagine. But the middle one said, this website may have saved my life. I never thought about putting a safety plan together before. So that's fun to get. I know you, but that's nice. But how are we thinking about adapting this? What's really important is this was built for survivors, but it would be a great tool for folks who don't have smartphone or internet, but have great providers there and refugee camps that I work in. I can imagine IRC clinicians. I can imagine American Refugee. I can imagine all these great clinicians using a tool like this, having the woman use it, and then talking through them with the safety plan with them. But I really think that we need to have a better idea of what safety looks like in low resource settings. It doesn't look like a shelter. It doesn't look like a hotline, but women are keeping themselves safe. It may be, as one woman says, I wear 5 pairs of pants to bed, so when my drunk husband comes home at night, he has a hard time getting me to rape me. So that's safety. She knows how to plan for safety. We have to do impact evaluations. We can't release these tools without knowing if there's unintended consequences. What's the potential for negative impact and impact on safety? Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nancy. Really impressive. Our next speaker is Nancy Schwartzman. She is not ready yet. She's a filmmaker, a media strategist, and a global activist to end gender-based violence. She's the executive director of Tech for Good, which created the Circle of Six iPhone, which you've already heard about, an Android app, the first women's safety app of its kind. Circle of Six won the White House Apps Against Abuse Challenge and has nearly 100,000 users in 32 countries. Really impressive. Circle of Six is localized for New Delhi, India, and Mexico is forthcoming. So we're really excited to hear more about this, Nancy. Oh, her presentation is called Can a Mobile App Track Sexual Assault and Enable Privacy? Lessons from Circle of Six.
Is everyone nice and chilly, like we are up here? Okay. So if my teeth are chattering, that's why. And apologies in advance, I'm not texting, but my notes are on my phone because I didn't have time to print it out. So that's what's been going on up here. So I'm really, really happy to be here with so many colleagues that there's so much crossover. Yeah. Great panel. And I'm here as a filmmaker, a survivor as well, and someone who sort of stands at the intersection of technology, storytelling, and solutions and campaigns to try and stem gender-based violence for women and girls. Circle of Six is both iPhone and Android. And it's an app that emphasizes privacy, community, simplicity, and technology. So we've heard a lot of these kind of similar statistics, but the White House put forth a challenge in 2011 with the first CTO, Anish Chopra, to try and come up with a tool to address gender-based violence for college young women specifically. So 1 in 4 college-age women will be sexually assaulted. Likely that number is probably a bit higher. And 1 in 3 teenagers in the United States report being in a coercive or abusive relationship. And from a global perspective, I was just in Mexico actually, and 67% of Mexican women report interpersonal and sexual violence. And nearly 1 in 2 women in Kenya will be raped in her lifetime, and 2 of every 5 women thought there's nothing they can do to make Nairobi safer. Thank you. So on the plus side, when we think of tools, we know, and this is probably low, over 60% of college students are using smartphones. In the United States, it's mostly iPhone, and 90% say texting is part of, very important to building friendships. 87% of citizens in Africa have mobile phones, and in a recent report on women using mobile technology, 9 in 10 women feel safer because they have a mobile phone. So keeping that in mind, we wanted to make something that was simple, that emphasized relationships and community building, which is so important for college students. With iPlan, I think it was similar. Young people go to each other in kind of a peer-to-peer model, and that can be disastrous if their peers are uninformed or are products of similar cultures. So we knew that, the problem is severe. In my own work as a filmmaker, I bring my film, The Line, to college campuses around the country. And it was sort of, in a way, an informal focus group to get young people talking about sexual assault, because after the film, students will come up to me, share stories, and this is stuff I've been doing all over the country, rural, small campuses, big urban ones, big state schools, and patterns were emerging for how young people were being sexually assaulted or vulnerable, or the stories had a lot in common. I'm going to show something that's a little bit graphic, but just to sort of remind us of the context young people are in the States, and how mobile phones and technology are being used in really terrible ways. Here's a slide from a lot of evidence that was very easily collected in the Steubenville gang rape case, where everything was documented, and perpetrators were basically bragging about behavior or joking about it and publishing it. So all of this stuff is being used in court and got 2 young men indicted, and now 4 adults are being arraigned because evidence was circulating and they were doing nothing about it. So when we talk about, this is the context that college kids are in, basically, because these are high school kids. I mean, not everyone, obviously, but this is just the wallpaper for a lot of young people. So wanting to harness the tools for good, but knowing that this is also going on in a very casual way. So the key elements to creating Circle of Six, which for 2 of the 3 of our very small team was a first in mobile development. Circle of Six is really kind of the intersection of stories, privacy, and interactivity. A lot of apps will give you information and just be, I'm going to read this thing. Well, young people, myself sort of included, like, that's not how I like to use an app. I want my app to be interactive. I want my app to connect to people and really truly be in that way social. So we gained access and trust with young people, certainly through college screenings. We did a lot of focus groups, in-person conversation as the app was being built, checking and verifying that the language was not victim blaming, which is really important. A lot of services for young women, tell them how to dress and to watch their drink. And actually, a blog post just came out yesterday about how not to get raped, and we're like, again, on the site Everyday Feminism. It's like, I thought we were past that. So, it's really, really important, and from our perspective, to always, empower the young person, empower the user, and never blame or judge them for their behavior, right? So our goal is to meet people where they are, which might be at a party with a lot of alcohol, and that certainly is never the cause of a rape. And I heard that echoed throughout Steubenville, constantly reminding us how much the young women are drinking, which obviously has nothing to do with them being assaulted. So hearing on the ground testimony for young people, creating an environment to get truthful stories and making sure our language reflected more of an empowerment narrative. So we wanted this to be very easy to use, and we wanted it to look fun and kind of like a game. So number one, if someone's in an abusive relationship and a boyfriend or partner is looking over the shoulder, it doesn't look like a police danger kind of thing. It's like a cute thing that could be a game. The UI, and also young people. Last year, IOM, someone did a study on how long young people stay on sites. If your site is pretty, if it's engaging and attractive, like young people will want to engage with it. So the design and UI was really, really important. And then it's very light coding. It's mostly SMS based. You need to download it on iOS or Android, but you can choose someone to be part of your circle, and they don't need to have a smartphone. So it's easily adaptable for non-smartphones as well. And you can choose people to be in your circle who do not have that technology. I'm going to show you the video now. This is how it works, 90 seconds. Oh, we might need the volume now. We need the volume. Cool. Timing with the lights. Hope you enjoyed that movie break that we just had. I wanted to just note with I was like, wait, they weren't in the dark before. I just wanted to note with the hotline function, 2 are pre-programmed in as national hotlines, and the third one is something that the user can choose and program themselves. And we give feedback on our website, what kind of numbers they might want. If it's most college students would never want to go off campus for services. So, put in your school's women's center, that's a suggestion, or local police, but something we found out in a user survey is that information is in our tutorial, which we did not make mandatory, so barely anyone's doing it. So I was like, okay, next time we'll make it mandatory. So just learning how, we didn't want to be heavy-handed in making people learn things about the app, but actually we're going to be heavy-handed in the next version. So, but again, just trying to not link our users to the police, because the police are they're not always safe places for victims of rape or domestic violence. So allowing the user, if they want the police, then they can program it in, but knowing that maybe they want other services at their fingertips. So giving them that option. So we did a qualitative analysis of our users with surveys. At this current moment with version 1, we did not collect data beyond how many users and where they're using it. So we've been creative about collecting stories and reaching out to people using social media, multiple platforms to hear from users. We have users in the military. West Point, I know, recommends the app. The military is interesting because they've contacted us a few times about trying to adapt it, but now they're having a platform change because BlackBerry is gone. Does anyone know what the military is going to use next? Or the government, actually. So so it's interesting because they're at a kind of a transition as far as what platform they'll be using. But Corey Chioka, you might know her story from the Invisible War film 2 years ago. She's a huge fan of Circle of Six. As a rape survivor, she was also stalked and then suffered PTSD and then became suicidal. And I asked her, why use Circle of Six? She had a suicidal moment where she felt she was really on the edge, and she said, I couldn't go into my contacts and find my husband, and Circle of Six was just right on my homepage, and I went for it. And as someone also who's been stalked, she says, as I feel like even if I'm walking alone, I have 6 people with me. I have my invisible army. I was like, wow, that's awesome. I never, didn't, that's really powerful. So speaking of rural populations, we have the Native Youth Sexual Health Network, which works in US and Canada with youth around sexual health, pregnancy, HIV prevention, and suicide and sexual violence. They recommend Circle of Six, but we had this funny conversation because I'm an urban person, and she said, yeah, the kind of GPS function is funny for us because if you're on the res and it's really rural, there's only really 2 places you can be, right? You're like at the store, or you're at your friend's place, but like everyone knows where you would be. So that was something I didn't think of. But what she tells her people about it, she said, look, it's peer to peer, right? By the time, usually if someone shows up, when the adult shows up, the incident has already happened. So if we can empower people to have a tool in their peer to peer interactions, that's, that's the key. That's why they recommend it. So I'm going to breeze on because I got the time notification. Other ways we interact with users is using social media. We do tweet ups. We did one with Take Back the Tech. Other UN, Say No Unite, I do one about every 2 months, talking to users, throwing out questions about what do you use to feel safe? Do you find if you confront a harasser, does that add more conflict to the situation? And hearing how it's different in India versus Kenya, really just sort of talking to lots of people as much as possible in a very sort of borderless way. Another piece of our campaign are educational tools. So the video that we made in, 2 afternoons in a small studio, I said we have to have a video because we want to show how the app works. Just keep it really simple, and we know that the media is going to take that video, and we've had like 75,000 shares with it because it's just an easy way to explain how it works. What we didn't expect is that teachers in high schools and middle schools who are desperate for content to talk about dating violence were using the video to talk about dating violence. And I was like, wait, people make films about dating violence that take years, that are really in depth. Why are you using a 90-second tool? And I heard from teachers via a social media tweet up, and they said, we don't have resources. So we teamed up with, his name is in our Healthy Educational Toolkit, and I'll grab it for you, but he wrote the piece for Pediatrics Magazine that surveyed 800 guidance counselors across the U.S. that said we have very few tools to talk to young people. So we wrote a Healthy Relationships Toolkit using the language of young people who don't say, oh, I'm in an abusive relationship. They'll say, oh, I have drama, right? So talking to 7th graders and 8th graders about drama and teasing out, is it drama or danger, is a lot more effective than, are you a victim? Are you being bullied? Because no kid's going to want to say, yeah, I'm being bullied. I'm going to use that word. They just don't. And Dana Boyd's done a lot of really good studies on that. So that's free and on our site and being used in schools. And then our global impact, 32 countries. To start, the app was in English, and we started seeing downloads throughout the English-speaking world. We were getting emails from India the moment we launched, from engineers, like, so excited, let us help you bring it over. And then following the gang rape and murder of the young woman, we saw in New Delhi, we had like 400 users in India, and it spiked up to 3,000 in a month because the Indian press kept writing about us as a tool. Oh, Circle of Six is out there, Circle of Six. And we thought, well, let's get it with resources local to New Delhi. So working with the UN, working with Jagori in New Delhi to find organizations that were reliable, that we could link people to on the phone. Jagori they didn't have a 24-hour helpline. They had a 9 to 5. So they felt very uncomfortable with us listing them as the only hotline. And then the Indian police had a 24-hour number. And I said, well, I feel uncomfortable. Can you really vet for us that if we put this number in, a victim's going to get help? And so it took a long time and talking to a lot of people to decide what were resources that we felt comfortable including. And there's always additional ones on our site vetted by multiple advocates in the field. So we partnered with the Safe City campaign in Delhi that uses social media. Very simple but very powerful, getting men and women to stand up and say how they want to change their city. The tenets of any awesome campaign online is like a photograph with words that can be shared easily. Working with them and getting Bollywood hunk John Abraham to endorse us with his 1.5 million Facebook fans was pretty good, I think. I was sad that we didn't get a photo with the app and like a kitten. That was my goal, but it didn't happen. So onwards, we are definitely moving towards non-smartphone versions of this platform to get it to people who don't have the GPS capability. There's a lot of interesting issues around who pays for the SMS in that case. If someone's in need and they've run out of money on their plan, is there a way that we can work with mobile providers? I think that'll be embedded in those versions. And we're also working with other institutions, but we'll talk about that in Q&A. Thank you.
Wow, this is a fantastic group of experts here with some amazing innovative technologies and some really great themes that I heard coming through here. But I'm going to turn it over to you in the audience and just ask some questions or make some comments, generate a little bit of dialogue. I think the way we'd prefer to do it is to take 3 questions or comments and then turn it back to the panel. So I'm going to ask anybody who has a microphone to raise their hand right now. We've got 2 microphones on either side. So if you have a question or a comment, can you just raise your hand?
Hi, just thank you so much for these fantastic presentations. My name is Kai Spratt, and I'm the gender specialist for the Asia Bureau. I just want a little bit more information about the Damagi app. What is the benefit to the women being screened? You're giving them referrals, I understand. Is there any sense of tracking? I had 2 questions about it, actually. I think you said that the A&M chooses the women to screen rather than screening every woman. I just want to clarify that's correct. And then if the woman's given a referral, is every woman given a referral, or how does that app benefit the woman?
Great,
is my
yeah.
question.
Before you answer, let's just take 2 more questions so we can line them up.
Hello, I'm Allison Brisk. I'm a fellow at the Wilson Center, and I'm a human rights scholar, and I'm doing a project this year on gender-based violence against women. I am very heartened by all of these options and presentations. I tend to look more at the policy end, and several of you mentioned sort of the weak link, right? That what are you going to refer people to? Where is the service? Where is the enforcement? You're giving testimony to a court, you're referring somebody to the police, but the police may not be available or even reliable, or may even be, sorry to say, part of the problem. So I know that what the work you're doing is fantastic, but could we talk a little bit more about that next step beyond the information to the enforcement and the policy and how that works? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Silva. I work for Women Influencing Health, Education, and Rule of Law, WIHER LLC, as a gender specialist. And my question is also for Mohini regarding India. I'm curious, since child marriage, the levels are so high in India, I'm wondering whether you're tracking the age of the women who come into the clinics to gauge the level of girls that are actually victims of gender-based violence, since girls really require a different set of responses to gender-based violence versus women. And I'm also curious whether in most of the photos or the images that you showed, it was women going to these antenatal care visits alone. And I work on the USAID Assist project. And among other things, one of the things that our project is working to do is to increase male involvement in antenatal care visits, not only to increase retention and outcomes for the mother-baby pairs, but also just to improve their own health. And so I'm curious whether you have a separate set of questions or whether you're not targeting women when they come in with their male partners. Thank you.
Great. I think we're going to stop. Just hold for those three. So Mohini, why don't you start?
Great. Yeah, thanks for that question. I think, so for the first question, I think the tool is generally made for advocates of gender-based violence survivors. So the patients that are being registered, the patients that come into the primary health care facility, all of them get screened for gender-based violence as part of the health services that they will be receiving at the time. And in terms of the sort of benefits to the women that are coming in and being registered in the system, they are able to receive more targeted and streamlined counseling content that is facilitated with media, so images and audio. And so what happens is the health worker, depending on how many people are in the room at the time, they either will play the audio from the phone, and so they listen to it together and they talk about it after, or they will plug in the headphones and then they'll share the headphone jack, and then they'll talk about the content after. So the educational component is sort of the benefit to the beneficiary. I think also since the app contains information about what types of resources and where to where the victim can be referred to. So they have a list of legal services that they can adopt, a list of shelters that they can go to that are nearby to where they live, and so they can actually select and decide with the health worker where they want to go or where they feel comfortable going. So this is the kind of ways that we engage with the beneficiaries. Should I take the second question as well? So we do collect age in the registration form. So there's a whole bunch of demographic information that we collect at the time of registration. And I don't know if St. John's and RTI have started looking at the data yet, because it's still pretty, we just started using ComCare there, but that's something that they should look at. I think in terms of content, creating counseling information specifically for young women is something that hasn't been done yet, but could be sort of developed. Right now, I think the training protocol is focused on antenatal care. So warning signs for women that are pregnant, warning signs that for postpartum women and mothers with young children. But there's definitely scope for expanding the content for sure.
To address the question about kind of broken systems or policy, I don't know if I emphasized it enough. Really, what we were trying to strengthen was a sense of community, was a way that young people are already interacting with each other, which is that's the first person you call when you're in trouble. It's the buddy system kind of put on your phone. It's the way that the peer-to-peer network works. I mean, for a lot of kids on Native American reservations, there are no services. It's 200 miles to the nearest anything. In the Dakotas, you can't get women's health care for hundreds of miles, right? So who do you rely on? Where do you get your information? Who has your back? So we were just trying to really strengthen those relationships and enable you to choose who you want to help you out and to choose your resources. As we move forward and work with institutions, let's say like campuses, they're desperate to get their kids into their women's center or health center, so we'll be embedding that onto the phone so they have their structures, but there's a lot of ethical considerations there. Is this the kind of school that sweep sexual assault under the rug, lets athletes get a pass, so it's tricky. So generally we work with we're starting to work with women's health centers and advocates who are on the side of victims or potential victims, and we'll be able to track how often they access that campus's set of resources. But yeah, I mean, the policy issue around sexual assault and domestic violence is so multifaceted, and there's many things that need fixing. So,
Yeah, I just want to add a word on the enforcement of the policy. I think what we have noticed is when it comes to gender crimes, especially in local courts, we have the feeling that this is one of the crimes that are very kind of, they are not being taken very seriously. I can give you an example. In Zimbabwe back in 2009, a woman was raped, during the 2008 elections, and she went to the court to accuse the perpetrator. And the sentence that came out the court was, the perpetrator was sentenced to 2 days in prison and pay $10. Of course, in Zimbabwe, they also use US dollars. So in that, you can see that trend across the board, whether it is in the DRC, in Burundi, in CAR, Central African Republic, or in Cote d'Ivoire, those countries where there is oppressive regimes and conflict, you don't see the seriousness of this crime. And we try to see where can be the problem. Though first, there is definitely a need to kind of, to enable the magistrate in those countries, which will take a whole host of mechanisms and procedures, but also at international levels. It is only last year the ICC's prosecutor set priority for gender crimes. So you can see in its first trial, there was not a gender crime attached to the use of child soldiers, though the evidence was just blatant, but no one knows why the ICC didn't choose to have that as a priority. So the enforcement that here is, if there are more tools, if there is a standard of, rule of evidence in these international or national jurisdiction systems, will that help or enable these domestic jurisdictions to do much better to tackle this issue? Because the solution won't only come from the activists, it won't only come from the international justice systems, but also, most importantly, from the domestic jurisdictions. And that's where the big problem still lies. So it is a challenge, it is an issue. So I think here we are thinking how with these mechanisms, with these materials and tools, we can really enable these domestic systems to tackle this issue seriously if possible. That's where the debate is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see that gender-based violence is such a complex issue, and it requires a lot of different kinds of services and the kind of coordination among services. So those are very difficult and complex solutions to try to put together and require quite a bit of resources. So, underlying all of this, we're looking at this in this panel at some really fantastic new innovations that help support the kind of work that people are doing to both prevent violence as well as address some of the needs of survivors. But in addition to all of this, we're going to have to really systematize services across the board. I think I completely agree with you. Chris, do you want to say something?
Sure. Before we reach back out to the audience for the second set of questions, I wanted to acknowledge Doris's comments up front in the beginning of this afternoon. She said that her team has spent an incredible amount of time putting together this panel and identifying really the best of the best. And I think the panelists and the presentations that have been given are just mind-blowing, and it's really been fantastic. So I appreciate the work you all have put together for this. I also want to make one quick comment. Something that didn't make my So What's Still Missing list for you all today, but I would certainly put it up there, is the importance of user-centric design when putting together any of these applications and tools. And both Nancy and Nancy commented in their presentation the use of focus groups and others to make sure that as the app was being designed, they were really focusing on what the wants and needs are of the users. And I can tell you, in a lot of our work, we've seen that without having that component factored in, the opportunity for success and scale for these technologies is extremely, extremely limited. And believe it or not, even though that is true, most apps are designed without any or very small user-centric design factored in. So I think that's an important point worth taking away. Next set of questions, please.
Hi, my name is Liz Myers. I'm the gender specialist at Banyan Global. So I'm interested in men in this side of the conversation on gender-based violence, and I was wondering if any panelists are aware of or currently developing any technology projects or apps specifically tailored for men, either promoting healthy relationships amongst men and men and women, or encouraging men to be advocates against gender-based violence. You know, for example, we saw some of those text messages that Nancy showed where men were, you know, sending these pictures around, maybe encouraging men to stand up against that and say, whoa, that's not cool. And then also in some of the apps that we've already discussed, are any of the panelists working on adapting the content to be more accessible for male victims and survivors? Because obviously maybe there would be different wording or different types of questions that would be more accessible to men. Thank you.
Hi, Morgan Mickle. I'm the gender intern at CARE here in the DC office. And thank you very much for all of your presentations. I did have a quick question. I like to make it quick. How do you know of any research, anyone on the panel that is transferable for women or girls, or women and girls for travel or work abroad, or when women are in the field who are concerned with safety and security, and how these apps, for example, with Circle of Six, if your circle is in the United States and you're abroad, how can your circle help you, or what resources are available when you're not at your home base? So if anyone can speak on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I would just like to say thank you to all of you for your presentations. They were all really informative. My question is directed to Nancy Glass. You mentioned briefly about having a difficult time reaching rural Spanish women. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about next steps and approaches to reaching women in not just Spanish areas, but rural areas around the world where they can't really necessarily reach phones or internet so easily. Thank you.
Who wants first?
Someone's first. You go first. Okay. I'll take your clothing while you're gone.
We're just like camping now at this point. Just get the sleeping bag. Well, I love that question about addressing men, and both as creating upstanders from bystanders, and also serving diverse populations with the app. So what with Circle of Six, we have a whole resource segment, although I learned that people just use apps and don't go to the website generally, about what it means to be in someone's circle. But the first thing you do is you add someone into your circle, and they say, oh, Nancy added you to Circle of Six, learn more, click. So it takes you directly to what does it mean to be in a circle, and that's completely gender neutral language. And we have another segment directly for men, like how to listen, how to be an advocate for your friend, how to stand up, what does it mean to be an upstander, not a bystander. So that's all, it's one step outside of the app, it's not embedded in. But what I've heard from a lot of users is like, oh, of course I have 3 guys in my circle. So it's already a very easy, light way for men to be like, oh, I'm gonna walk you home at 3 o'clock in the morning, of course, right? Like I already do that for you. And so it's very, it's not subtle, but it's kind of an easy, low bar for men to step in. We also know that we have a lot of young queer men using the app in urban environments. So for sure, it is being used not specifically for male survivors per se, but as a safety mechanism for men and women in the field. You can change your circle really easily. So if you go abroad, you can just bring new people into it. But the point about, people have said, well, you need to make an app that's like tell men not to rape app, right? So I think we have two ways to do that. I think, so if you've heard of the yes men, they're these really brilliant kind of cultural disruptors. If me and the yes men, I know one of them and I need to like keep working on it, if we did a joke app, the Tell Men Not to Rape app, that got a lot of attention, I think that's a really good first step in just calling out how ridiculous all the risk reduction whistles are for women. If you think you're going to rape, dude, press this button. You know, if you can make it kind of a cultural interruption, make it funny, get people thinking and talking about it, that's the first step. The other piece I think we need is more of a cultural shift towards, and we're getting there, towards more men in leadership, speaking to younger men, calling out. I think Steubenville's helping that happen. I think Penn State, what happened there. I think we need more of kind of a cultural shift for young men to even want to be upstanders. Every campus I go to, there's one or two men in the audience that say, oh, I want to change this at my school and I have no mentorship. Or I'm the big guy on campus doing anti-violence work and then I graduate and there's a vacuum. So they're out there, but there's not enough yet. So I'm wondering if we need more pieces of film or like some kind of cultural tipping point to then create the mobile tool. But I don't think it would be very small and very specific to help the activists on the ground, which could be useful, but I don't think we're there yet. So.
I'd like to pull two examples from South Africa that speaks to this. One is for those of you who are gamers. I am not, but there are game apps out there, including one called Moraba, which is a mobile-based game particularly targeted for kids, boys and girls, that starts to build their education around what gender-based violence means, what violence against women means, how to address it, how to talk about it. And that's an app that has been shortlisted for a number of app competitions and awards, and that's coming out of South Africa. The other one, also out of South Africa, is just the Mixit platform itself. Mixit is one of the most successful, most widely used social networking platforms. It's primarily in South Africa, but not exclusively. It has an incredible number of services built into it, and a lot of them revolve around just talking about issues of love and relationships and what it means to have a healthy relationship that is useful for both men and women. And quickly speaking to the point on apps that have been designed specifically for male survivors, I think it's just worth noting that many of the ones out there, online and mobile-based, are for any type of victim or survivor, man or woman, and even for those who aren't but want to report because something's happened to a loved one or a good friend, they can use those tools as well.
If I may also add a little bit, I think from our experience, from our experience, we have been working with a group in Uganda called the Refugee Law Project, and in Uganda, that there is where you have a high rate of male, of rape against male in Africa. I think the problem is the reporting mechanism available to men as opposed to women. Of course, the whole campaign on gender-based violence has been most, people feeling like it's most about women, not men. So we had this partner who has been struggling to get men come out and speak out, or also report any kind of gender crime they're facing. The problem is the stigma, which is pretty much causing really the the lack of this high number of reporting of male who are experiencing sexual violence. For example, I met when I was in Kampala in September. I got a chance to meet with one survivor, and when we're talking, trying to ask, how is he mobilizing other men to come forward and report, because he's been one of the courageous men to report rape that he's been victim of. And one thing that he said, Buken, you know what? The minute you come forward saying I've been raped, people will think no, it's just because you are gay. and then we know how the gay issue in Uganda is. So that is kind of a stigma, and the cultural association makes it very difficult for men to come up. Unfortunately, the technology hasn't evolved that much to give access to those people who cannot come publicly, but if they can do it via technology, that will be a way, worth exploring. As Chris mentioned, it's difficult to distinguish an app that will serve only men or women, but everyone can access it, everyone can use it, but that really is one of the areas where there is need really for more research and more, people who can use really those apps.
I just wanted to mention one thing, that the Sukia project, so the 10 health workers that are using the app, 2 of them are actually male health workers. So that's, I didn't mention this, but what I've learned is they're actually key champions for the prevention of gender-based violence, at least in the context of this project, and they often play the role of mediating any sort of marital conflict. So that's the kind of approach that the project is taking. So usually the male health worker will go in and speak with the husband or the family members that are part of the violence. And I also think, like, in terms of mobile apps and in the context of low resource and developing countries, in India, women have very sort of low mobile ownership, especially in rural areas. In urban areas, it's higher, I think, and so we can't necessarily, with ComCare, it being a tool for community health workers, you register the cases in your phone. You can also add on an SMS component and send SMS reminders or have SMS follow-up or something like that with the cases that are registered in your phone, as long as there's a phone number. But you can't really send messages to women because they're not the mobile phone owners. But if you did develop content or an application for male survivors, then you could actually engage them at a secondary level. You could reach out to them with SMS reminders or IVR content or things like that. You can actually reach the beneficiary, and that's just a question of device ownership.
So, to address your questions about rural women and Spanish-speaking women, so it has been a challenge for us, and I think that we're doing a couple things through the study, and we'll continue in our next study. So, it's from our experience, it's got to be multifaceted outreach, because many people aren't going to have easy access to good internet at their homes. So we're partnering with some the community-based organizations. So I think Head Start is a great place to have access. Other child care programs that we could safely, community health clinics. So, again, a safety decision aid it's a tool. And it's not meant to replace good advocacy or good clinical support for survivors. It's meant to complement. So I think that women, if they can access it on the internet or on their smartphone, that's one way that will help them make decisions and then link to local resources. But if we can also provide it in places where women go in their community, that might be another way to help them link to resources. And also, I think that we have to probably get even more creative. So one of the things we were doing on the Native American reservations, because we were working in Oregon and Arizona, is we went to the casinos and we reached out to women who are working in the casinos. I think we have to go to places where women are working and living, where they may have access to a computer at work, or they may have a friend that they can talk to and say, hey, can I use this afterwards? Because the reality is, globally, we're just not going to be able to reach as many people as we want to, but there are other mechanisms that we can outreach to through these technologies.
I just wanted to highlight quickly one great campaign that engages men, which is Breakthrough, Ring the Bell. They use Bollywood actors, well-known actors, and create these really smart 30-second shorts about how average men can kind of interrupt violence as it's happening. Really smart, really good stuff, and they're kind of like leading the forefront, I think, of engaging men using media and campaigns.
Kind of comes in waves. I think we're open to another 3 questions. Do we have any takers? Okay.
Hi, thank you guys for presenting. My name's Daniel. I'm here from Deloitte Consulting's Gender Working Group. And I was just curious about, as these apps grow, if there's been any sort of discussion about next steps for kind of how these apps or technologies can be used for non-acute forms of gender-based violence, so eating disorders and the like.
Hi, thank you guys for the presentation. My name is Abiesa Davis. I'm a M&E specialist with Counterpart International, and my question is on Circle of Six. I know you mentioned that the app is kind of cutesy, so people can maybe not tell what you're doing. It looks like you're playing a game. Given how, like, kind of the increase of snooping or people invading other people's mobile phones, are there any built-in mechanism in the app to sort of hide it from a partner or something like that, or any information on how to maintain privacy around the app if you're in a situation where someone is looking through your phone or something like that?
Hi, my name's Lee Stefanik. I'm with CARE. I have a question for Nancy Glass. I think it was last year's IOM event where I first heard the statistic of how many women in abusive relationships are actually, the animals in the home are also abused too, and that's a key leverage point for keeping women in those relationships. And so I'm just wondering, it was shockingly high. I wish I remember the statistic, but if that goes into your decision planning at all, and kind of taking that into account, the safety of pets too, and if any of your resources also link to shelters that also allow animals like Red Rover. Yeah.
So I'll start, because that's a really nice thing about having a decision aid and linking to partners in the community. Yes, we can do that, and we can find out. We can help, women can identify if that's something that they want more information on. So if you imagine when they're setting up based on the algorithm, the information they put in about strategies they're already using about safety, their own priorities, their level of danger, the tailored feedback is based on an algorithm by their input. And so imagine like an Amazon checkout list. So a checkout list comes up that says suggestions for your safety plan. And she can click on any of those and move them into her sort of outbox, her personalized safety plan. And then click on that and dig deep into some specific questions. So for example, some women, like I said, don't want to go to shelter. So we have a link to a video, YouTube, of what a shelter's like, because we all have that in our mind, what a shelter's like. And then shelters in your area that accept pets, because that is a huge issue. It is. I would never go anywhere without my basset hounds. Seriously, I wouldn't. I'm not kidding. I have basset hounds. Two. I wouldn't go anywhere.
So to answer the question directly, right now the version 1 we have, if someone takes your phone and you don't have a lock on it, they can go in and see who's in your circle. They can't see if you've hit a button. They're not going to be able to get that data, but your contacts aren't protected in it as of now. So I think we're going to do a big survey before we decide, is that a necessary step? For sure, they can't see how you're using it. Your average guy or abusive partner is not going to be able to see that. But this conversation came up with Take Back the Tech. There's kind of a global conversation going on now around sexting, and which everyone's doing to some extent, and how nothing is really safe or encrypted, and how Snapchat lasts forever. It doesn't go away. So I think kind of collectively we're gathering a list of procedures to help teenagers be a little bit smarter about encryption. Again, keeping in mind that if a video is shared, that can't stop a screen grab, but there are things, like if you are making a video and you're teenagers, this was a concern of a Mexican activist, make it on the girl's phone so that, and then you can put it in an encrypted folder. So a screen grab can still happen, but that video can't be disseminated. So there are some kind of layers of ways, which is not necessarily connected to Circle of Six, but I think that conversation needs to be happening more, just kind of acknowledging how people are using media and then how to make it a little bit safer. So I'll let you know when I write the safer sexting for HuffPo. But yeah.
We do a lot of work with mobile network operators around the world, since they are the conduit for much of this information. And there have been conversations in places where issues of snooping and just spouses finding out about what messages have been sent, of how to make sure that those messages go away. And it's much harder to do through apps or through over-the-top services such as WhatsApp. But to the extent that people are using SMS functionality or voice calls on their phone, there are ways of partnering with mobile operators to make sure that in times of crisis, or if you're doing a survey and you're trying to collect information from people, that as soon as that message is sent, it does disappear. Now, of course, the operator has it on their network, but they're not going to release that information. They're going to keep it secure and confidential, because that's critical to their success as well. So it's just to say that if it's appropriate, and operators do tend to get bombarded by people who want to partner with them on different things, but if it is appropriate, there are ways of working with them to minimize that.
And what do you mean by operators, like Verizon?
Mobile, yes, okay. Exactly.
Anybody want to comment on the levels of issues that could be addressed, that not necessarily suicide or sexual assault or lethal threats, but something just a little bit more, less severe? Anybody have any comments about that question?
Are you talking about like depression, eating disorders? I mean, so.
I guess presuming that obviously this violence doesn't occur just physically, but that there are also often eating disorders or other emotional problems associated with it, if there have been discussions in terms of how the technologies can help combat that as well.
We have modeled our decision aid based on a lot of the clinical work that was done first on depression, and people getting access to ways of assessing their own level of depression, and then accessing support groups online, peer groups, learning more about medications, learning more about providers in their area. And so I'm not an expert on safety decision, but there's a group, the Ottawa group, who registers all the clinical decision aids, and they do have weight loss, they have eating disorders, they have all kinds of clinical decision aids that I think can be adapted and can be linked to. I think that for me, this is a starting point that could. So we link on our app. We have a link to Circle 6. I mean, why wouldn't we? To tell young women, hey, you need to look at Circle 6 too. So having a way to link people to other resources is one of the things that's so nice about this, and having it really handy.
Definitely, a lot of people have approached us around bullying in young people, and there's crossover with bullying, queer kids. We've talked to the Trevor Project. There's sort of this like trifecta of coercion, depression, bullying, feeling isolated, and when you're a teenager, it's all in the stew. And if you're in a rural environment, you feel isolated. So. We developed a prototype for suicide prevention that was someone who had already made an attempt. So it's like a very specific, someone who's already been checked into the hospital, who has medication now and doctors and appointments and we wanted to dial it back to 14-year-old kid, might be queer, might be coming out, to just do the kind of mood assessment, depression, linking them to resources. So far earlier than an attempt. So just looking at overall well-being and overall connectivity to try and build a tool. So that's something we've been thinking about.
Yeah, with the informal cam that we've been developing, we have, for example, the insurance companies were kind of, were very excited about the idea about how having the informal cam, because they won't need to send somebody to go verify. The informal cam can do all of that. Means, when an accident occur, the app can verify, the app has a GPS inside, can verify the time. The app can verify, can also take picture to see what happens exactly. So the insurance company can have all that data, all those data, and then make sure that, okay, we got the time the incident, we know when, how, who was involved, etc. All of that can be done through that app. So it's not necessarily in terms of other issues, but it's just to say, some of these apps that are being developed can be used for human rights abuses or human rights purposes, but also with other issues that can be solved, whether it is in human rights or non-human rights related.
I'm going to take my prerogative as one of the moderators to ask a question myself, and this is addressed to everybody, including you, Chris. If you were imagining this audience to be policymakers, and having just heard your presentations, I heard a lot of themes around personalizability and flexibility to the resource. That's one of the key components. I picked up on that too, Chris, of what you said about, this is a key component of if we're going to be investing in resources like this, these are technologies that should be personalizable or flexible enough for people's use. And I also heard a lot of themes around this last set of comments, which is around built-in security mechanisms for ensuring confidentiality and privacy. So if you were imagining this audience to be policymakers, and from your experience, what recommendations would you have for them in terms of some general guidelines if they were going to be investing in resources for ICT technologies to address GBV?
I'll pick one. I don't want to keep you here until 8. My suggestion would be for policymakers and regulators, particularly in low and middle incomes, would be to focus on what are the sticking points from keeping cost of handset services and mobile broadband high. Because there are a lot of policy and regulatory mechanisms that if improved, could actually decrease the cost dramatically. So it's not just to say that it's the private sector that is keeping prices perhaps inflated artificially or not. But when there are value-added tax and luxury taxes imposed on the importation of mobile handsets, and I don't want to get too technical here, there aren't really policies in place in countries that promote tower sharing or spectrum allocation. These keep affordability beyond the means of many, particularly those living under $2 a day. I make that plug because USAID has recently launched the Alliance for Affordable Internet. And right now, it's a collection of 35 plus huge international tech firms, bilateral donors, NGO implementing partners that have come together and said, we're committed to going out and working through some of these policy and regulatory issues so that we can line up with the UN Broadband Commission's goal of bringing down the cost of mobile and fixed broadband to within 5% of monthly income within the next 10 or so years. Believe it or not, in some countries, a few in Central Africa, the cost of mobile broadband is about 1,000% of monthly income. So in those cases, those countries, there's quite a ways to go, but there are ways to address policy and regulatory hurdles to bring down those costs, and that would be one of my suggestions.
Well, as someone who pays $500 a month for internet in DR Congo, I understand, and that's the reduced rate. So for me, one of the key issues that I would say to policymakers is that it needs to be survivor-centered, and with engagement of survivors in the development. Because there are unintended consequences. And we don't even know them all yet. And we're still learning because a lot of this is new in many of the places where we'll be working and implementing these strategies. I think we need to have good science. We need to know what's effective. And just because we can doesn't mean we should.
I would say, which is not necessarily tech-based, but mandatory prevention education that's age-appropriate, starting in first grade and through college. geared at healthy relationships at every age, geared at young men. As you said, survivor focus, but also on perpetrator behavior, not on victim behavior. So really like overhaul of health prevention education, and that it has to be mandatory, can't be voluntary.
Yeah, I'll just add that, I believe you guys are the donors and the policymakers as well, as you noticed. I think we have to look at the trends. In Africa, for example, look alone at countries like Kenya or DRC. The use of mobile phone goes beyond the simple texting or calling or chatting. People are using mobile phone to even send money. People are using mobile phone to share issues around health or around HIV/AIDS, information, education. So it is one of the kind of a revolution that I've seen in Africa taking really a big step in the last few years. And that's where, for example, I'm kind of very, very saddened by the policies that are being made by the African governments. Let's say, for example, in the Congo, where the investment, where the government investment in technology is even less than 1% of the national budget. So there is an issue right there, because though in the privates and individuals have been investing that much, even when you compare the individual investment, if you compare with the government investment, you find that the individuals are investing even more than the government. Because of the use of mobile phone, it now becomes a daily life or kind of practice among people. And that's where I think the government will kind of lead the way to invest more and more. So to say even in the Congo right now, if you look at the government, how do they collect data of rape? Though the country is one of the most reputed in terms of rape, they don't have even a database by themselves. Data they use, it comes from NGOs, including international NGOs and other studies. So there is an issue out there. So for the decision makers, I would say this will be something pretty much can be a kind of a win-win solution, because once they invest more in technology, they will get the huge returns from the information they will get, and even address some of the issues in the communities, because it is still it is already working without having a government support. So this is where I think those governments should think in terms of how to invest in technology and address some of the daily issues the communities are facing.
I'm gonna speak from more of a content perspective, assuming that content would be integrated into technology solutions, like that support community health workers, things like that. But a lot of the organizations that we work with, create protocols, clinical decision-making tools, counseling information, all automated in mobile apps to support the better delivery of services to beneficiaries. Often programs, at least that I've worked with, have experienced a lot of challenge in defining counseling content that address gender issues. It's very hard to formulate culturally appropriate messaging and culturally appropriate information related to this. I mean, we've had organizations that have sort of left that piece in their mobile application alone, not touched it for a whole year before they got support from a gender specialist to help them define what is appropriate for the Indian context for that particular state, things like that. So somehow, I think what's needed is coordination in resources that are available for community programs that want to include a gender component and are facing a lot of challenge in trying to figure out what the right approach is or what the right messaging should be.
Kenny just reminded me of something, and I just made the connection on the spot here. Universal service funds. There are hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in universal service funds around the world that are unused. And these funds, you're actually paying into them every month through your phone bill. Probably each of you are paying about $2.50 roughly every single month to go into a pot for us to extend broadband into rural and remote communities around the US. These funds exist everywhere in the world, but by and large, they're not managed efficiently and they're not being used. So hundreds of millions of dollars of unspent money. One suggestion would be for policymakers who are focused on those would be to take a look at the crowd maps that we've talked about today and see where there are greater incidences of gender-based violence and violence against women. In all likelihood, those pockets probably don't have the connectivity, don't have the infrastructure, don't have the capacity in place for survivors to benefit from these tools. If you align Universal Service Fund rural build out into those areas, then it's probably a little bit roundabout, but one way of increasing the capacity for people to employ these technologies.
We can take some more questions.
Hi, my name is Shireen Santosham, and I am from the GSMA and Women program. And my question is about the trade-off between scale and localization. So a lot of the things you've talked about rely on what you've deemed personalization or user-centric design, which inherently is localized. And in order to reach scale, you need to provide these local services around the world in many different places. But that's expensive. And so my question is, as you think about scale, whether it's in a place like India where a woman in Mumbai is very different than a rural woman in Bihar, how do you create a suite of services that you can then tailor locally and then can go to other countries?
Yeah, my name is Pam Muthuri. I'm a development specialist with Alfred's Associates in Kenya. And my question is, are any of the apps available open source for use in LMIC countries?
Hi, excuse me. My name is Emily Janock, and I'm on the Gender and Empowerment team at CARE. And I have a question about content development. So one of the things that you said is really you need to make the content appropriate to the user. And one of the things that happens in this space is that what is appropriate to the user changes so fast, and especially if you're talking about young people. They might be using the word drama today, but 2 years from now they'll be using another word, and you're going to sound like a moron if you're using the one that their predecessors used. It's really embarrassing to sit in a speech where somebody is trying to target the moment of last decade. So how do you try to make sure that the content keeps up with the changing space, and that it's not something that you develop once and then you don't touch for another 3 years?
I think that was three. Let's take those.
So with the content, so that's what's, we've worked really hard on our platform, the architecture of our platform, so that we don't need any programmer to, I can go in and based on work we've done, focus groups, update, we can make updates by just typing it in like a Word document and editing and removing based on feedback. And that's a continual process. We get feedback, emails, calls to say, this link's not working and so that's what's nice about the platform we have. So our development team can work on the user interface. They can work on, and the experts in content can work on the content. So that's been a nice upgrade to our system as well. And related, we have the danger assessment and the scoring algorithm is published. The priority setting strategies and algorithm are published, and our tailored plan is published. It's open for people to use, software developers to open. I can get you in contact, with our programmer, but we've built all of our stuff to be used by folks. We have adapted it to the original content, to the Canadian, to Australia, to New Zealand. We're going to Hong Kong. And how that's done is by experts in the community take the platform that we have, then go out to their community, do focus groups, do pilot testing, update it using the language, safe houses versus shelters. I mean, there's some basic things, but the structure has basically remained the same. What I do know is violence against women, when you get down to the core of it, looks very similar. What people prioritize is their children, if they're moms, their safety, their children's safety, having resources, their privacy, and having their feelings for their partner and wanting. So this we've seen and has stayed true in the other countries, even through focus groups. But we wanted it to be adaptable, so we've opened it to folks to do that. And you just have to contact me, and I can get you to my programmer, and he can tell you how to access it.
I was going to say all three of those questions are very related, actually, at least in our context. But with ComCare, you know, I was mentioning this during the presentation that we have a ComCare app store that we call the ComCare Exchange, and it enables organizations that have developed any app on the platform to share it publicly in an open way, and all the content, like the questions, the checklists, the media also that was developed as part of that project are available for other organizations to just download into their project space. And the platform is open source, and it is user configurable. So, you know, our entire field team in India, we understand how the technology works. We're able to build simple to complex applications on the platform. But none of us have software engineering experience. So anyone can go in. It's kind of like a SurveyMonkey type thing where you can create your own forms and checklists and stuff like that. So it can be very easily adaptable to different country contexts and different state contexts, like within India as well. So you download the app. You know, one of the major things that you would probably update is the language. So you'd go from Kannada in Karnataka, Bangalore, to Marathi in, you know, Maharashtra. And so you can change the language very, very easily. And you'd also change the media. So you'd want to change, you know, the audio recordings, and you convert that in that language. So you can localize it. So I think we've been able to really get the scale piece, because, you know, things are very user configurable, and we're encouraging every project to share their content on the ComCare Exchange. In fact, as part of the, you know, any organization that we worked with, of the 40, as part of the USAID Div 2 stage grant, they're all required to share their app on the exchange. And so that means that we have content, you know, not just GBV, but in different types of sectors, so in health and agriculture. You know, all that content is available for others to download and scale in their region.
Yeah, I mean, our witness, our experience has been more, in terms of trying to adapt the materials that we create, as shown the guide for any interviewing survivors of gender-based violence. I think that's been one of the discoveries that we have made at Witness. It was very easy for us to conceive and put there a guide, and then send the guide to partners who are in the field to try to adapt to, you know, in terms of culture and values, to make sure it fits very well within their programs. Because the area of gender-based violence is very complex, and it differs, you know, region to region, country to country, you know, things like that. So how we make sure the guides that we produce, these materials, are adapted into local realities according to the experiences that people have, and also into the languages that people speak. But the problem then becomes, the more we're trying to localize these guides or these materials, the more challenging it become because of the vocabulary. You know, when you talk about the video, how do you translate video in, let's say, Kikuyu language in Kenya? It becomes, you need maybe to call it video still, but then someone. So these are kind of, the terminologies that we use may be different, but still the idea is that people can take it, adapt it, and use it according to their needs. They don't have to use the whole guide, which is, 22 or 23 pages, but whatever they can pick inside, that will be very helpful to their work. So that's the idea. We are not at the stage where we can localize the obscura CAM, which is something very challenging because we work in areas where infrastructure is a very big problem. So we do not expect the partners, though it is available, we like to see, partners in Zimbabwe take the informal CAM, adapt it in a way they may want, but we also understand the challenges around infrastructure and the access to these technologies that makes it very difficult for them to adapt. But then we move into the materials, which is pretty much easier for them to adapt and to use locally and whatever language they want to use. And then we also have mechanisms where we learn from them. So once we produce these guides, then we send to them saying, you tell us how you have been using it, so then we can improve it. So it's kind of this cycle of learning which we have been in, and it's helpful for us to make sure we can produce those materials that can be used by the local partners that we work with.
Kind of to echo that, it's sort of like, and the questions are really related, so answering them all, but sort of constantly soliciting user feedback so that you stay up to date. Now, all of our materials are out of date because we updated for iOS 7, so everything now looks different, and my creative director like cries on my shoulder every day because I'm like the budget capacity person. I'm like, we can't change every single piece. So at every stage, because tech is changing, and then iOS 7 update happens, and then so content-wise, we're always going to be, soliciting user feedback, keeping up to date in the field of gender-based violence. What's the language people are using? What's the new terrible video that everyone's talking about that maybe we need to do a tweet up about? Just trying to stay. As a team, we're very small, so we're able to stay light and flexible. And as a team, we're very small, so our capacity is small, So it's like, I think the two things kind of work together. And as we move forward down the line, seeking to build a mobile platform that doesn't have to be iOS or Android, or moving towards open sourcing, so opening things up. I think we'll just work to document that change and watch it happen and just stay engaged and try and keep up.
Great. I think we're going to draw to a close because we're coming to the end of our time, but I think this has been an amazing panel with a really fantastic set of new resources. And I want to ask if you would be willing to share in a round of applause for our fabulous speakers. Thank you so much to everybody for coming out on such a cold, wet day, and for such a fantastic and inspiring set of presentations. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm getting off the stage, man. It's cold up here.